evening. Our top story this week: the U.S. government shuts down, which is causing all kinds of havoc, including poor parents fearing for the possible loss of their WIC checks, while thousands of kids are booted out of Head Start. But a group of kids in New York is telling Congress to just get along and get the job done. After taking baby Veronica back, the adoptive parents are planning to ask the kid's father and the Cherokee Nation to pay their legal expenses. And the South Carolina governor drops the extradition order against the real father. In California this week, Governor Jerry Brown signs 10 bills to improve services to foster kids, including the creation of state-run runaway and homeless shelters. Then Governor Brown signs another bill that would allow children to have more than 2 legal parents. And thousands of Los Angeles CPS agents walk off the job after not getting the raises that they didn't deserve. In Massachusetts, the child protective industry wins a class action lawsuit brought on by lawyers from the watchdog group Children's Rights, alleging mistreatment of the state's foster kids. In Oklahoma, the child protective industry is having a hard time keeping CPS agents and foster care providers, which is in violation of a plan made during a children's rights class action lawsuit a few years back. New Jersey is having a problem with an increase in children being abused after leaving foster care, as the child protective industry claims to have been making some progress during the last 10 years worth of reform efforts brought on by another children's rights lawsuit. And in Kentucky, a newspaper is arguing that the child protective industry should be held in contempt of court for not turning over records regarding the deaths and serious injuries of children who are involved with the state's child welfare system. In Maine, the child protective industry is getting set to ask the legislature for more funding after a major increase in child removals, which they're blaming on drug abuse, along with the result of poor planning on their part, while Maine's governor promotes the taking of even more kids during a groundbreaking ceremony regarding the upcoming memorial to Maine's murdered children, which will be along as soon as the agency funding the project can come up with another $5,000. In South Carolina, frustrations are growing against the child protective industry, which is failing the kids who have died after being reported to the Child Abuse Hotline, which is prompting a South Carolina state senator to question the director of the Department of Social Services as to why the kids were killed while under the watchful eye of CPS. In Florida, lawmakers are being told to fix the state's child welfare system in response to a rash of child abuse deaths over the summer, and the suggested solution, of course, is throwing more money at them so they can hire more workers and provide better training to CPS agents. In Washington, former foster kids are fighting to get attorneys for other kids in the child welfare system. In Texas, the child protective industry has cut off more than 400 foster homes that were run by a private contractor after major problems were found in a number of the homes, including one where a child died after being snatched because her parents smoked pot. And in Rhode Island, the office that is supposed to act as a watchdog over the state's child protective industry is lacking any clear mechanism for reporting information about the deaths or near-fatal injuries of children. In Massachusetts, a video surfaces of CPS agents promising to weed out Christian foster parents who would only tolerate a child's gender confusion instead of endorsing it. According to a new study, California kids whose parents chose not to vaccinate were the major contributing factor to a whooping cough outbreak. In New York, experts are trying to figure out ways to deal with a ton of false reports that are being made to settle grudges. And in Michigan, the child protective industry is all worried about racial disparities in their adoption system, as white babies are adopted more frequently than are any other race. Popular children's games such as Cops and Robbers or Cowboys and Indians has now become illegal in American schools, as the paranoid are increasingly using zero-tolerance policies to suspend or expel any kid caught playing with a toy or imaginary guns. A new study is showing that doctors are much slower to prescribe psychiatric drugs to preschoolers than they were a few years ago. In Nevada, a judge rules that a surrogate lesbian mother can fight for custody of her child. And modern science is making child custody cases more complex, because now that it is possible to freeze embryos, sperm, and eggs, women can force men into parenthood and child support years after they split up. In Russia this week, the government schedules a vote for a bill that would remove children from the custody of gay parents. In India, a man is being held for raping his foster daughter. And in Australia, a panel of experts will gather to discuss the pitfalls and promises of surrogacy and forced adoption at an upcoming seminar. In Canada, Manitoba Liberals are calling for reforms after finding that child protective industry is focused too much on apprehending children and not enough on helping families before their children are taken away. A Filipino couple from Manitoba, Canada, win their fight to keep their Metis foster child. And in Newfoundland, the child protective industry is being sued for failing to protect a kid 9 years ago. In England, the Communities and Local Government Minister Eric Pickles has been accused of having prejudices against people with mental health issues after yelling at a survivor of child abuse and telling her to, quote, adjust your medication, end quote. quote. And an investigation into the murder of a foster mother in England claims that staff shortages and budget cuts are to blame for her not being fully informed about the emotional problems or mental health history of the kid who killed her. In entertainment news this week, radio talk show host Alex Jones correctly guesses that a liberal caller is a social worker, and the adopted daughter of actor-director Woody Allen comes forward with sexual abuse allegations against him. In Florida this week, a family is suing the child protective industry after the kid they adopted molested their biological son and they were not warned by CPS agents that he was sexually aggressive. In California, a foster mother gets a 20-day jail sentence and 3 years probation for putting a 20-month-old into a bleach-soaked diaper, but all the jail sentence was suspended unless she violates probation. In Nevada, the FBI is investigating the family court after multiple claims of abuse by family court staff, including one woman who was improperly searched by a court martial. And in Pennsylvania, a U.S. appeals court turns down Jerry Sandusky's request for a new trial. In Ohio, a female social worker gets 3 months for having sex with boys in a juvenile detention facility. In Texas, there is alleged sexual abuse at a home where a couple has adopted 10 kids. A Texas CPS agent is charged with sexually abusing a 14-year-old. And in Utah, a foster mother stands accused of using a shock dog collar on her 2 adopted kids. In Wisconsin, a couple who was caught fraudulently spending money that was designated for the care of children in their foster care agency are ordered to pay back $1 million of it. In Indiana, an employee with the Family and Social Services Administration was fined for selling Mary Kay products on her work computer during work hours. And in Oregon, a 14-year-old is accused of killing his foster father and another man while on a hunting trip. In California, a brother and sister who were both serving in the Navy meet for the first time in 30 years after being separated at a very young age. In Maine, the Department of Health and Human Services stops paying Medicaid payments to 2 targeted case management agencies after allegations of fraud surface. In Florida, a grandmother is upset because they're considering deporting her grandchildren to Mexico to be with their father, who was previously deported after CPS took them from the mother. And finally, tonight in Nebraska, a judge rules that a 16-year-old foster kid can't get an abortion without the consent of adults. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.